All right, folks. Well, here we are again for another 8 ways to. And today we are talking about 8 ways to not walk on eggshells with your diverse team. I am excited to be having this conversation, and I'll be very honest here and say also that as a white middle-aged man, it also makes me a little bit nervous, and I'm excited about that nervousness too. And those are things I'm excited about. Now I'm going to tell you what I'm thrilled about. I am thrilled to have Desiree Goldey on with me to do this 8 ways to. Desiree and I have been in contact for about a year and have established a mutual fan club. And Desiree is the director of marketing and culture for ZRG Partners, among other things. And I am thrilled, Desiree, that you are here. Desiree,
Thank you.
what else would you say about yourself in
Oh my
preparation
gosh,
for this
so
conversation?
much. First of all, that I'm a fan of you. So that's the biggest thing to note in this. Yeah, I'm the director of marketing and culture at ZRG. I've been doing this work in diversity, equity, and inclusion for ZRG for a little bit. It's a super exciting time to be talking about this. It's a super exciting time for me as we go through the ebbs and flows of diversity. And this is a great subject to be talking about today, Aaron.
Mm. It is a great conversation. And before usually we jump into this, we just kind of go, all right, Desiree, what's your first suggestion? Before we get to your suggestions and mine, uh, what is it that you would say? What is it that has people walking on eggshells with their diverse team? Why is this even a topic?
Yeah, I mean, look at the climate that we live in today, right? Look at all the things going around us, whatever side of the political scheme you're on, or whatever. DEI has taken a backlash over time, right? In the last year and a half, it's gone to a different route. If we are looking at 2020, we would all have been hype over all this diversity and trying to get ramped up to do it. And now we're on the backlash side of it, right?
Mm,
And so right now, I think people are walking on eggshells about how to do this work, how to lead a diverse team, how
yep.
to even talk and have conversations about it. It's just the
Yeah.
nature of what's happening right now.
And I think there's enough change still happening that people feel like they don't know what's current. I
Yeah.
remember when I was teaching theater at the University of Massachusetts and talking about, I was doing a big lecture, which was not my usual thing there, but I was doing a big lecture about the challenge of drawing a diverse pool of audience and the challenge of drawing a diverse pool of actors for theater. And I remember talking about African American folks, and some well-meaning young white woman came up to me afterward and was pretty mad that I hadn't said black. And so there is, I think there is, and this is where I get nervous saying things like this.
Right.
I think there is an over-indexing on particularness and over-indexing on emotionality, and in response there's also an over-indexing against things like DEI and B, against political correctness. There is this push me pull you going on that leads to extremism on both sides of that question. What do you think?
Yeah, and it leaves the people in the middle going, what am I supposed to do now?
Mm.
Right? Like,
Yes.
where do I go from here? And
Right.
how am I supposed to even do this? You want me to have diversity in my team, but I don't even know how to talk to them, what to say
Yeah.
to them,
I
how to
can't
lead
even
them.
function. I don't. If I give anybody feedback, I'm setting myself up for a
The
complaint.
HR lawsuit, like they're ready to
Yep.
get, sued, fired, ready, so it becomes this like this crazy, compacted, crazy environment that you're living in, and you are walking on eggshells all the time, and it doesn't produce innovation and productivity in the
Mm,
workplace.
right.
Bottom line, right? Which
Yes.
we know diversity actually does. So
Innovation and such, those things come out of creativity. Creativity is born on the back of comfort,
yeah.
not anxiety. Necessity may be the mother of invention, and anxiety is its killer. So, what I really hope will happen for you who are watching right now or listening to us, what I hope will happen for you is that you will leave this conversation, if not with greater confidence and ease and breathing a, a little easier immediately, then at the very least have some tools, have some suggestions, have some very tactical things that you can do starting today that will help you not walk on eggshells with your diverse team, but instead have confidence. Uh, Anything else that we should say, Desiree, before
Oh
we
my gosh,
jump
we
in on
could
this?
go on for hours and hours and hours, Aaron. I don't think we
Yeah.
should. I don't think we should do that. I could
No,
talk
no.
about this all day.
No, we're going to wrap up in 45 minutes or so, and maybe even less. So let's get right into what the folks at home can do. Desiree, what is your first suggestion for people who would like to not walk on eggshells with their diverse team?
Yeah, I threw the big one out there first because I think that it's going to shock people a little bit.
Ooh,
And I'm going to say, stop trying to be colorblind. Um,
ooh,
and I know that's hard to say, right? It's pretending that race, gender, or other differences aren't there, right? That's
mm,
not equality. It's a way to avoid discomfort, right? It's a way to say, I don't have to acknowledge these things, so I'm not going to address them. But everybody is unique and brings something to the table. Their unique skills and contributions from their background, their experiences, all of those things. And if you choose to ignore those differences and you ignore those unique properties to that person, you're not creating an inclusive environment,
mm.
right?
I
You're actually stopping inclusivity.
I think that is so wise, and you're right. You know, for a lot of people, perhaps shocking, and people wear it as a badge of honor. I am colorblind,
Yeah.
and you know, I I don't know that that's something I've ever said. I think it may have been at one time decades ago something that I aspired to. And I think not only is it not something to aspire to, right? Because I think about things like eye color, even, right? There's
Right.
beauty in, like, my dad has these beautiful hazel eyes, different, very different from my blue eyes. That diversity all by itself is a bit of the splendor of the human condition. And then uh, it's also just plain a lie. I don't know that there is any one of us who is colorblind. The fact is, Desiree, I grew up Jewish. I grew up in Jewish schools, going to synagogue not infrequently. And if you were to tell me, Desiree, that you are Jewish, I would be surprised. And that surprise all by itself means that I am not colorblind. Now,
Right.
that's not to say I've never met a Black Jew. I've met many. And still, the vast majority of folks who are Black are not Jewish. And so it's a surprise. And so when people say I'm colorblind, I think to myself, is there really nothing that would surprise you
Right.
connected to how people look, the way that they dress, the kind of cultural things that they bring along? Is there nothing that would surprise you? If
No, it's
if
crazy.
not, you're a liar,
You're
and
a total liar.
you may be well intended. So
There's
Yolanda,
also this piece. You remember, I know when I was growing up, everybody'd be like, I'm not a racist, I have Black friends. Right?
ah,
Like
yeah,
that statement is so ridiculous, right? And so this goes to that same principle
yeah,
of, like, you're pretending not to see color, but
mm,
you are definitely seeing color in that statement, right? It's a
yeah,
tricky thing, but pretending they don't exist is just as bad as, as being outright against them.
You know,
right?
I came into this conversation, Desiree, wondering how vulnerable am I gonna get? Like how vulnerable am I gonna get to ridicule? How vulnerable am I gonna get to showing my ignorance and things like that? So, folks, please do not hear this as a false equivalency. The idea that I'm not racist because I have black friends is so ludicrous. Because and here's where please do not draw an equivalency. I don't like assholes, right? I think assholes suck. And I have friends who I know are assholes. So for me to say I have friends who are assholes does not mean that I don't like assholes.
Right.
Or
It's
excuse me, that I
ridiculous.
like assholes, that I think that
Right.
it's fine to be an asshole. It's the same
It's the
in
same.
in the sense that not in the sense that black people are assholes. Please do not hear that.
No.
In the sense that I can have friends who belong to a category of people that I don't like,
Right. Right.
or who in a category of people that I think in some way are less than. And by the
Right.
way, sometimes I'm an asshole, so
Me
there
too.
you go. Yeah. Um,
But I think when you do that too, you also overshadow the contributions they bring with their experiences, right?
mhm,
You know, how you grew up as an Asian American may be different than how I grew up as Black American. And that can, especially in product and things that we're working on in these organizations, if you choose to ignore those experiences and the uniqueness they bring to the table, you're doing yourself a detriment. It's
right.
just the bottom line,
Yeah.
right?
I mean, you're in marketing, right? And
I
so
am.
the things that appeal to one population are not necessarily going to appeal to another population, depending on what you're trying to market and when and to whom. You'd better not be colorblind if you're going to be effective.
Right? Absolutely not. Right? It's why this is the first one that came to mind. Plus, I wanted to start
Uh,
off a little crazy for you.
yeah. Well, you did it. You started off a little crazy. You got me out on a limb, putting myself in jeopardy, right? And so here it is, folks, right? I mean, you've seen me now a little bit getting into that "am I walking on eggshells" zone, and I've decided to go ahead and stride on out onto them. Is there anything else, Desiree, that you want to say around this?
Yeah, I would just say that, diversity is a strength. It is it is an advantage. And if you choose to ignore that diversity on your team, you are doing yourself as a
Hmm.
leader a huge, huge detriment to the work you're doing and leading a successful team. That would be my last statement on that one.
So let's get into a little bit what the strength is in having diversity on your team.
Yeah. Well, you could talk about all the reports and data. I could throw out McKinsey and all these other quotable things that talk about how it's proven that diversity in teams brings more innovation and productivity. We could talk about that
Right.
all day, right? That could
Yes.
be a whole nother conversation. But I think that, if you choose to have everyone look and think the same, how can you be innovative? How can you change anything? How can you have a unique experience? There's
Yeah.
just no way,
And
right?
to put that into an extreme, right? Kodak owned half of Rochester when I lived there in 1994. Right? Kodak is a company that everybody knew. My 10-year-old daughter has never heard of Kodak. If I were to talk about Kodak, she wouldn't have any idea what I was talking about because Kodak invented the technology that essentially put them out of business. And there was not a diversity of thinking sufficient to have them say, maybe we should be paying attention to this digital photography thing that we invented.
Right. I mean, it's so insane, right? If you put
Yes.
we used to live in a town called Levittown, and they built this town basically around a company, right? And they put everybody in these houses, like basically cookie cutter houses, set them up, and basically put a lot of Caucasian people in these homes, right?
Mm.
Eventually, in 15 years, right? The company went out of business, and now this town was built for no reason, right? It's
Mm.
just a crazy idea that you're going to stick all these people together, build a company, and it's going to survive. It just doesn't make any sense as we talk about being innovative and great thinkers and
Yeah.
unique thinkers.
The reason, or at least the biological reason for the taboo on incest is that redoubling even on positive things doesn't necessarily lead to excellence. I think that's part of why M. Night Shyamalan's movies have kind of gone into like they started off with Sixth Sense, an
Yeah,
incredible movie, right? They hit a few just incredible movies, and they've become more and more inbred
I
as he's
know.
had fewer and fewer checks on M. Night Shyamalan redoubling on M. Night Shyamalan.
Yeah.
He needs some more
Yeah. I love
diversity
his movies, though. They're so
on his
crazy.
creative team. All right. Okay. So before we get into my first suggestion, all of my suggestions, as I look at them, I am starting to recognize all of my suggestions fall under the category of building strong relationships. We feel comfortable in strong relationships. The strong relationships are the ones where we feel free to tease and ridicule playfully and things like that. So you build strong relationships, and suddenly the air is a little easier to breathe and the eggshells go away. So my first suggestion inside this umbrella of build strong relationships is go out of your way at every opportunity to be kind and considerate and to stand for the profound success of each individual on your team. If you are being kind and considerate and going out of your way to stand for the people on your team, then when you maybe do put your foot in your mouth at some point, you're going to put your foot in your mouth inside the context of all of this evidence. And I don't say evidence in the sense that it's something that you're going to bring to court. I mean, it's evidence inside the person on your team with whom maybe you've put your foot in your mouth, that you've built up a bank of goodwill, and building up that bank of goodwill makes us feel more confident because the relationship is strong and can withstand even real the word I'm looking for is like real indiscretions. If you really do slip up in some way, you want to have that bank of goodwill that comes out of your genuinely expressing care and kindness and desire for success.
Yeah, I think I wrote about this today. How about you be a human, right? To other humans, right?
Yeah.
And be kind, considerate, have empathy, bring all that to the table. Because when you do that, you do build that bank where you can go back, and if you screw up, they're gonna pull you aside and say, guess what, dude? That didn't really work out for me, right? Like you said the wrong thing here, or I felt some sort of way. But if they feel nothing for you, or you don't have that bank of kindness and consideration you brought to the table, they're not going to do that for you, right? They're not going to
Right.
tell you when you're wrong, right?
Absolutely.
And then we get into the HR nightmare, right? Where I'm like, oh, dude, that guy's a total jerk. I'm going to HR, right? Instead
Yeah.
of having an honest human conversation, right? And so I love this one.
I remember the research, seeing this research that is fantastic about doctors, right? If I were to show you two videos, Desiree, of doctors, no sound, we're not looking at them doing anything but interacting with their patients. People will, the doctors who are rated by folks viewing these mute videos as kind and having a good bedside manner, they are sued for malpractice far less than those who aren't, regardless of the outcomes.
It's
My
interesting.
favorite employment attorney is named Aaron Goldstein, by the way, the Dorsey Whitney. Please look him up if you need one. Goldstein's rule is don't be a jerk.
Yeah.
And he even goes so far as to say, you know, the ADA is for everybody. Make reasonable accommodations for anybody and everybody on your team. It's kind, it's considerate, and it shows that you stand for each individual's success on your team.
Right? Because diversity is somewhat about being kind to others, right? And other unique experiences and their lived experience and trying to understand, right? And that comes with kindness and
Mm.
consideration. And if you're not doing that, you're setting yourself back. I used to, when I was first got into leadership, I had a horrible, horrible manager. I hope you're on this call because I hope you're listening. Um, but he's like, you have to stand up for everything. You need to be mean and rude and just yell at people and get things done. And I'm like, dude, you're crazy. Like, why would I want to do anything for anybody that's yelling at me all day?
Mm.
Yeah, it didn't
Yeah.
last long together. But like, why would you want that? Why would you want to work for that person?
You can
I'm
get
going to
the
do the
appearance of
least amount of
compliance.
work, right? I'm going to do the least amount of work for you, not the most amount of work for you. But if you're kind and considerate and we have some kind of bond, I may work even harder than I might have worked if it was just me doing my regular job, right? And
Yeah,
so
this pays dividends on lots of levels.
It does. It does. It does. I mean, this is a great one. It's so funny. I didn't have kindness in mind, but this is a great one. I talk less about
LinkedIn, and we've had enough conversations. I know that it's not for lack of having kindness as a top value for you.
Absolutely.
All right, Desiree. What's your second suggestion?
Yeah, my second one is quit tiptoeing around feedback. So one of the things that I think this is leadership in general is that leaders tend to tiptoe around feedback when they feel uncomfortable in the situation with someone who's not like them. And so they end up not giving the feedback they would give to someone they feel some sort of connection with. And what ends up happening is you slowly get an underperformer on the team that probably, if they had been given the same consideration of feedback, that they probably would be performing at a very good level. It's just that they're not getting the same consistency of feedback. Everyone should be given the same level of candor, the same level of feedback, the same level of everything if you want to lead a diverse team. You've got to stop you got to stop. Just because you assume someone's going to be uncomfortable does not mean they're going to be uncomfortable. Right. But if they see they're being treated differently and not getting the feedback they need to do their job, then it becomes a problem. So this is my second one.
Wow. And you're going to get no argument from me. In fact, last week I was working with a team where, I would say the predominant outcome that we are working to drive is to promote conflict on their team, to promote effective, digestive, constructive conflict on their team, because they are kind of walking on eggshells. There are disagreements that have gone undigested. And this beautiful man, just really a dear-hearted fellow, has been not giving feedback to a woman on his team. He said, I don't have any issue giving men feedback because I'm not nervous about it. And I'm nervous giving women feedback. And so there have been performance issues that have been stacking up over time. And her job is now in jeopardy because he's been tiptoeing around giving feedback. And so what could have been a whole lot of really small, inconsequential, and potentially very impactful conversations have now turned into the need for a pretty significant conversation. And she's going to say, and rightly so, why the hell didn't you tell me something before?
Right. I have done like so much research and backstory about this, about how when people, especially in marginalized groups, underrepresented groups get, fired, they're usually getting fired because they were never given feedback. And one of the biggest things they're telling HR is, I was never told any of this, right? I was never told that I was underperforming. I was never given the tools necessary for me to change what I was doing, right?
Yeah.
Because someone's tiptoeing around them. And I will say it does happen a lot with men and women. And I find that curious, but it does happen mostly with men to women giving
Hmm.
feedback, and it's a crazy thing. Like, they're on your team. Why wouldn't you treat them the same? But people do this. They do absolutely stop themselves from giving consistent feedback across their team. So stop doing it, people. Give feedback to all of your team. It's
You owe
crazy.
it to yourself because it's gonna be eating at you. You owe it to your company because that's what you're being paid to do. And maybe now, most importantly, you owe it to the people on your team because that is the price of leadership. That's what leadership is. That is a part and parcel of
Oh
leadership
my
is
gosh.
giving people feedback.
And I always talk about this, Aaron, and I think me and you have talked about this as well. When people get into leadership, they're not trained correctly, as we know. And one of the things they're not trained to do well is do this piece of the work. They're trained to make profits and hit their KPIs and do all of that. They are not trained to give feedback and manage people. And this is where we get into a tricky place. And that's why this is one of my big ones, because I believe that most middle, especially middle management, is not being taught how to do this at all. They're
Yes.
not
Yes.
being taught how to give that feedback. And I know this is the work you do, especially with teams, but this is a big one.
Well, and the research shows that feedback is not effective. And
Right.
that research is across the board. It isn't around, are you giving feedback in a using a method that's effective
Right.
inside a strong relationship. So, folks, if you want to learn about how to give feedback, then look me up. You know how to find me. I'm the only Aaron Schmuckler on LinkedIn. Happy always to talk about this because I care deeply about this. Feedback may not be universally effective. I'll tell you what's definitely not effective is no feedback or tiptoeing around feedback. That's sure as hell not effective.
Not at all. Not at all.
And it's not respectful.
It's not
I would
respectful. It's not responsible. It's just bad leadership, and it should stop ultimately. And if you're above that leader, you should be saying, how are you giving feedback to your team, right? If you're at the top level,
Yep.
what are you having one-on-ones? Are you having these conversations consistently? Because now you're in that position and you should be helping your middle manager or whoever be able to have those consistent communication with their
Yep.
teams.
And
Absolutely.
very likely, your answer is going to be yes, right? People are just going to, oh, yeah, of course, I'm giving feedback. Okay, great. Tell me about 2 pieces of feedback you've given in the last 24 to 48 hours, right? Like,
Right.
make them tell you the stories because that gives you an opportunity to assess their methods, learn the truth of whether in fact they're giving feedback. By the way, both ways, right? Positive feedback and negative feedback. We all need both in order to
Yes.
grow and improve.
Yeah. And I
Well,
also would say this last thing, and like about this one, like honesty is key here, right? Whether it's negative or positive, and negative feels very uncomfortable. But again, I'm going to back what Aaron said. This is the price of admission to leadership, right? You have to take on those big, hard conversations. Just, I'm sorry, it's part of your job.
yeah. And our jobs are not to be comfortable. They are to be
Right.
effective, right? It's your
Right.
job to be
Right.
effective, not
Right.
comfortable.
Exactly.
Okay. Uh, my next suggestion for you folks, my second suggestion, Desiree has already hinted at, and that is conduct weekly one-on-ones with every single person who reports to you. So all of your direct reports get 30 minutes from you like clockwork every week. Sacred. This is something that happens pretty much without fail. Pretty much without fail every week. And some of you are now saying, I don't have time for that. And there might be a few reasons for that. One is you might not be delegating enough or effectively. You might have too many people reporting to you, and the literature the research shows that you can effectively manage about 6 to 8 people who are direct reports to you. And beyond that, the relationships start to decline. And I've told you already, it turns out all 4 of my suggestions are about building strong relationships, because inside strong relationships of trust, we don't walk on eggshells with each other.
Yeah. I always have this argument about weekly one-on-ones and the format of them. First of all, I think they should be happening. I don't care, and I think that organizations that are putting more than 8 people under a manager, this is where we start to struggle, right? But having those one-on-ones with a format and an agenda and getting, feedback from both sides is essential. You shouldn't be going in and saying, okay, here's what you didn't do. Here's where, I want to hear from you too, right? Getting that from them. How can I be better as a leader for you? What is not,
Yep.
that all of those conversations should be happening. What didn't I do for you this week? Right? Because I think
Yep.
we make them so one-sided that they're not valuable, right? I mean, my manager comes and says, Desiree, you're great, which happens all the time, by the way, people. Desiree, you're great. You're amazing, right? But I don't get, Desiree, here's where you need to improve. Here's what am I not doing for you? Which does happen with my boss currently, by the way. But what am I not doing with you for you? That becomes a very, very, it becomes an almost nothing burger, right? We might as well have not spent the time together,
Yeah.
right?
When we train in our manager training programs, we train people not only to conduct one-on-ones, but how to conduct one-on-ones. And it starts with, if you're my direct report, I say, Desiree, what's on your mind?
Nice.
And maybe you're going to take up that whole half hour with things that are on your mind. I am going to be okay with that, because I'm your supervisor. If there's stuff I need to talk about, I know I can get time with you after our one-on-one. But it always starts with, what's on your mind?
Isn't that a nice thing, right? If someone's asking you what's actually on your mind.
Yeah.
It's like it's such a simple thing, but it would be so great if someone asked those questions of other people.
Yeah.
It goes back to the be kind thing too, by the way, people.
It may be projects that are on your desk. It may be one of your colleagues. It may be the vacation that you just got back from. And it may be that your kid or your mom is sick. What's on your mind is an open question that builds strong relationships, because I'm expressing care for your whole self.
Yeah. This relationship, path that you're on is really good, because I think this is the undercurrent of all the things that I'm saying, right? There is this relationship piece to team. And I think we forget that piece of the work that we do as leaders. There is this team environment we call our teams, but if there's no relationship between anybody on the team, it's not a team. It's just people doing some work, right? Right. And that's not valuable.
And it even goes back to your very first suggestion, which on the face of it may not look like a relationship issue. And yet I would say that it is, right? If I'm going to be in relationship with you and build a strong relationship of trust, I've got to relate to the entirety of you. You are a woman. You have a birthday this month, right?
I do.
You care about certain things. I need to know and learn what those are. And you're Black, and my being colorblind is just going to erase one of the areas where it's important for us to relate, except that it won't erase it really, because you're going to become aware that I'm skirting around that issue eventually.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it.
Okay.
I love it.
Desiree, what's your third suggestion?
Yeah, I would say mine goes to don't rely on stereotypes to understand your team. So this can be this happens all the time, right? You assume that a woman is a mother and has to pick up her kids and she's not going to work as hard. You assume that the older gentleman on your team is not going to pick up technology. You assume all of these, crazy things because we put stereotypes on people, and then we don't and then we allow it to limit how we lead them, right? We put them in a box, and it doesn't support anything that they bring to the table that you just don't know. So this goes back again to the colorblind thing a little bit, but it also goes heavily into our preconceived notions of what people are, and not trying to combat them by understanding the actual person, right? And it's a tricky thing. It's a tricky thing, because we all bring biases to the table, right? I have my
Yeah.
own biases. You have your own bias. Everybody brings a bias to the table. But if you continue to let that bias guide you in how you lead your team, you're going to get stuck, right? You know, Sarah has to go pick up her kids at 3 o'clock. She just doesn't work that hard. Well, Sarah might be picking up her kids at 3 o'clock, going home and working until 10 o'clock at night, right? It's just not real. It's just not real unless you understand what's actually happening with that person. You're actually just creating a cycle of crazy, and it just keeps going back and forth.
Very, very true. And it makes me think about the the tendencies, right? For example, women tend to be less assertive than men, right? But the differences between individuals, even within those two categories, are greater than the difference between those tendencies.
Right.
So even though some stereotypes are based in some level of truth, it's still the differences between individuals are so far greater than the differences in those tendencies.
Oh my gosh, just have a real conversation with some of these people, right?
Yeah,
Well, I
you're
always
right.
say, I talk to leaders all the time. They're like, I just don't understand why, so and so won't work so hard. And I'm like, have you talked to the person? Do you know what's going on in their life? Do you know maybe they have some personal situation going on that you could help with, and be kind and be considerate and have empathy and sympathy? And maybe you come up with a different schedule, right? The beauty of remote work for me is that diverse teams are allowed to happen, from disabilities to neurodiverse to mothers, to all of these things, because I believe that it's created an environment where a lot of this can be taken away, and allow people to work how they are able to work. But doing that is also understanding how they work, right? And if you're not having that conversation with them and understanding how they work, you might be like, remote work sucks because I don't know that they're doing anything, right? I'm an early riser. I'm at my desk at 6 o'clock in the morning. In the middle of the day, I'm pretty much crap, right? And then from there, I work all night, right? So but that's how I work. My boss could care less, and he's had that conversation with me to understand that that's how I work, right? He
Mm.
doesn't assume because I'm a woman. By the way, I have a wife. I don't have kids. I'm not picking up kids and stuff like that, right? My middle of the day just isn't good,
Yeah,
right? You could
right.
assume that I'm doing all these crazy things, but I'm not. It's a very tricky thing to take away bias, but it's the struggle we have as leaders to do. But I need you to find a way to do it, right?
Mm.
And not bring those to the table when you have a person on your team. Have a real conversation. It's a big
And it
deal.
really it I don't think there's any, well, whether there's any reason to tell you to stop being biased. It's not real.
Right.
And we bring our biases. Some of them may be race based or gender based or accent based. There are lots of biases that we can have, some for better, some for worse. The challenge for leaders is not to get rid of them. The challenge for leaders is to recognize them and then make deliberate choices around the data you're getting from this individual
Right.
right now, over time, what's happening right now and in front of you. Now, the truth is, eventually that may diminish your biases. And when we fight them or pretend that we don't have them, that's when they really influence our behavior and our decision making as leaders in a very deleterious way.
It goes back to the same thing. I not a racist because I have black friends, right? It's like it's the same principle, right? Like you're not acknowledging that you may have some bias to someone, right? And you're actually hurting yourself, your team, all of those things because you're not acknowledging what is actually happening in those conversations. Acknowledge
Yes.
it, have them, do some
Yep.
work on them, you know?
And I love things like the disc profile and other personality type kinds of things. I like those. Again, they speak to tendencies. And
Right.
so, if I were to guess, Desiree, I would guess you have some I tendencies, right? It's in there somewhere in the disc
Right.
profile, the kind of social, the desire
Yeah.
to be heard and hear people. That I tendencies don't mean that in this moment right now you're the like whatever part of you that is introverted isn't dominant. That like it may just be time for you to go and not relate to other people for this moment. Even our individual tendencies don't govern the moment. And so, part of what I hear in your guidance to don't rely on stereotypes, but understand your team, what part of what I hear is be present.
Right. Just again, I think sometimes we're so caught up in the metrics. I mean, I was just talking to you about this, Aaron, before we started about I've been in corporate a long time. You know what I mean? And we get so caught up in the KPIs and the metrics and doing the
Mm.
work that we forget about the human part of doing the work, right?
And then the metrics suffer.
And then the metrics suck. Right? Like, it's a whole cycle of how you become a productive and innovative team. It's not ignoring the things that are challenges, right, and uncomfortable.
Yeah. And I sometimes speak to the folks who are very high. I'm going back to the disc profile, right? Very much performance focused, performance, performance, performance. That doesn't work with a car. So how do you expect it to work with people? If you don't do oil changes, if you don't keep the tire pressure up, if you don't pay attention to the little knocking sounds that your engine might start making, your high performance automobile isn't going to deliver performance. So how could you possibly expect that from much less mechanistic humans?
I mean, it's just ridiculous, right? This is
All right.
it's an era of change, though. Like when my parents were going to work, right? It was work, work, work for the company for 100 years, right? Now, now in this world that we live in, you don't have to do that. You can jump. So if you're not making an environment for people where they feel valued and heard and seen and communicated to and treated like a human, they're not going to stay.
Right.
And rightly so, right? Rightly
Yes.
so. I love this new world where like, you
And
just jump.
we talk, us Gen Xers, well,
Yeah,
we talk about, and particularly our parents' generation, those
yeah,
boomers,
yeah. Those
we talk about how entitled people are.
yeah,
And one of the things that you're pointing out is that, yes, in fact, they are entitled. That's the nature of capitalism, is that we are entitled to whatever we can get in the market. And so
right.
if you aren't providing that witness, that individual attention, and that's something that I want, then I'm absolutely entitled to go into the market and get it somewhere else.
Absolutely. I
All
love
right.
these like millennials and Gen Zs jumping all over the place. I'm like, go for it. I wish that I had been that smart, but you're right. And they're just not putting up with it anymore. Right.
Yep.
They're just like, no. If so I want to say this, if you can't figure out how to do this, if you can't figure out how to lead your team, who's a diverse team, they will leave. Right. In the new generation, maybe not my generation, Gen X, but the next generation isn't going to put up with it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I've certainly left, right? I mean, I moved around as a Gen Xer. I moved around to find what was going to work for me.
That's smart.
All right. My third suggestion about how to end up so you're not walking on eggshells with your diverse team. My third suggestion is state your intentions, state your intentions, state your intentions until you're blue in the face and be genuine about it. very often, we Gen Xers and boomers find ourselves complaining that the people that we manage have misunderstood our intentions. And that's why we're walking on eggshells, because my intentions are consistently misunderstood. Well, most of the time when I'm talking to leaders who are complaining that their intentions have been misunderstood, I ask, well, what did you tell them your intentions were? And they say, I didn't tell them anything about my intentions. And so if you want your intentions not to be misunderstood, then reach into what's really so about your intentions and either state them because they are wholesome and defensible, or shift them so that your intentions are going to be well received. If you can't have intentions that are going to build up the relationship, then you've got a problem. And
Yeah.
the last time I fired someone, I told him what my intentions were, even in that moment of firing, and he said, "Thank you so much for the opportunity." He was a remote worker, and he said, I consider you to be my online business dad. I am not saying, and I don't think Desiree is saying either, that performance doesn't matter and you as a leader needn't require performance. Of course you're going to require performance.
Yeah,
Like a
absolutely. I
human
would
being.
never say that. I would never say that, right? I'm a overachiever at its finest, right? So I believe in true performance, but I also believe in guiding people to get them to that performance, right? If
Mhm.
you and to help them get there. If you're entering new to the workforce, you don't know how to work really yet, right? You're coming straight out of college, and I get a manager who doesn't help me and guide me to teach me how to
Mm,
be in the workforce. I'm starting them off on the wrong place, in the wrong
right.
foot, right? And without them understanding my intentions of how to guide them, what we're looking for, what we're trying to accomplish, how are they supposed to know what to do? Right? Like, how are
Yeah.
they supposed to get there? Right? And I'm
People
just like, oh, you know
complain.
what to do. You
People
know?
complain that these new generations don't know what professionalism is.
I know.
And I say, okay, then kindly teach them.
Right. Or they're lazy or they're this or that, or I'm like, well, I just think they're not willing to put up with the BS we put up with to some extent. And on the other extent is I just don't think they know what they don't know yet,
Right.
right? And if you're not helping guide them in the right direction, I feel sorry for you as a leader. I think you should be doing better.
Yeah.
Like, you
And
really have to
John,
be better.
I really want you to succeed. I really want you to succeed not only in this job, but in your career for as long as you are breathing air and working for your dollars. In order for you to succeed, you have to understand something that you seem not to know right now,
Right,
which is you have to be on time for meetings. If you
right.
want to be respected, if you want to advance in your career, frankly, even if you want to keep your job long term, you're going to have to be on time for meetings. And by the way, let me further define my terms here because I want you to succeed. I'm stating my intentions again. When I say on time for meetings, what I mean is if the meeting starts at 8 a.m., you are already in your seat or on Zoom with your pen in your hand and your notebook out in front of you, looking at the person who is going to be leading that meeting. That's what I mean by being on time. So 7:59 and 30 seconds, you're already in that position. There's no stank on what I'm saying. Like if you listen to my tone of
Right.
voice, this is matter of fact. I don't presume you should know this. I would like it if you knew it. That would have been great. And the fact is you don't. And so I'm here to share it with you because my intention is that you succeed here and ongoingly in your career.
I love it. I love it. I mean, it's so good, right? If we all had that.
Right. Who
Most of
wouldn't
us
want to?
just shuffled around until we've kind of figured it out.
All right. Desiree, before we get to your fourth and final suggestion, tell the folks how and why they may want to get a hold of you.
Yeah, obviously I on LinkedIn, I'm Desiree Goldey. I don't know that I'm the only one, but I am definitely one of the few. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. You can also visit us at ZRG Partners. You can get me there. Glad to connect with anybody, glad to talk to anybody through these things. We do this work consistently with diverse teams and diverse hiring. So I'd love to talk to you about the journey that you're on. And yeah, I'd love to connect with everybody here.
All
Thanks,
right.
Aaron.
Thank you. Glad you're here. And what is your fourth and final suggestion about how to not walk on eggshells as a leader with a diverse team?
One is lead, don't pander.
Ooh.
Stop trying to be liked. Stop trying to avoid stepping on toes. You're missing the point of leadership entirely. Inclusivity doesn't mean lowering standards. It means bringing everyone up to meet them. So I want you to stop. I'm going to go back to state intentions, but I'm going to say it a different way. Set clear expectations, apply them equally, have difficult conversations, do all the work of true leadership. Don't avoid conflict, hold people accountable, have those deep conversations to get there. Your team will respect you more if you do this work and lead in fairness. Stop trying to be their friend. I love it.
You get no argument from me. You get no argument from me. And very interestingly, there's going to be some tension between this final suggestion of yours and my final suggestion.
Oh, geez.
That may initially, like right off the bat, seem like we're contradicting each other. And I think we are definitely not.
Okay.
So lead, don't pander. Define pander.
Yeah, wishy-washy, kind of, not be a true leader, trying to be liked, trying to skirt issues, trying to avoidance is the killer of everything, right? Like try to just make so I had a boss once tell me he was like my best friend. And I'm like, you're not my best friend. You write my check. Like that is not what I need. I need a leader, right?
Yes.
Be a leader. Hold up to me accountable. Make things fair. Make sure there's equal opportunity also give me feedback that I need to improve myself. Do not try to be my friend.
And you can have, I've been talking about building strong relationships of trust. You can have strong relationships of trust with people you do not like.
Absolutely.
Right? I do not like my neighbor, for instance, particularly. And I do not mistrust my neighbor at all. There are lots of things that we do differently. I don't particularly enjoy his company. And we've got a strong relationship of trust fit for neighbors, right? So this is fit for the nature of the relationship, given your roles. All right. Anything else for us to add?
I just want to say, and I want to add to that. I don't think you can't make a friend out of a leader. I don't want to take that away from that, right? What I'm saying is as a leader of a diverse team, you have enough to deal with. Stop trying to be friendly and set real standards, set real communication goals, set those things. And then if the friendship develops, that's something that develops over time.
I think that feeds into or plays from a distinction that I make between being nice and being kind. Right? Polite. We can be nice. If you've got spinach in your teeth, I may want to spare you and spare me the embarrassment of telling you so. I think we all agree, basically, not the kind thing to do. The uncomfortable and kind thing to do is to say, because I would want you to tell me, I'm going to tell you before you go into this job interview, before you go into this sales call, you got spinach in your teeth. Right? No, you're good. Right? And to neglect to say so, that's just to preserve this moment of relative comfort. That I would say is what I'm hearing you refer to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right
absolutely.
On. I'm with you. All right, folks. I'm Aaron Schmuckler. I'm the CEO and co-founder of the Yes Works, where we are working tirelessly to help our clients, business leaders, and their teams to work at speed with stability and agility through better communication, collaboration, and leadership. And right now, even as we speak, we are enrolling our next manager's upskilling sprint. There are a few seats left and it will sell out. People have called it best in class. Folks who are veteran, we've had brand new managers in here. We've had veteran managers, 20 years in management in companies whose names you know, have gone through this and called it best in class, said it's changed the way that they've led and changed the relationships with the people that they lead. And business owners who send all of their managers say that it helped them increase retention and improved their performance on all the metrics that they measure to have their managers go through this program. So that's something you can send us a few managers to, or we can come into your company, whether in person or remotely, and run a manager training for your folks. This is just one of the things that we do to help build strong relationships of trust within your team so that you can perform better and respond to change more effectively. My fourth suggestion about how you can not be a leader who walks on eggshells with your team is to choose to be responsible for how your communication lands. I'm sure I've referred on some of these other episodes to the Manager Tools podcast, which I think is wonderful. Mark Horstman on that podcast says communication is in what the listener does, and he may be quoting Peter Drucker when he says that. But it is my responsibility to communicate effectively with you. And that's going to mean that I have to adapt how I'm delivering my message depending on how you listen. And that may not be how it should be. And it's not our job to tell you what you want to hear and the easiest and should be methods of being an effective leader. It's our job to tell you what works. And what works is to take responsibility for how your communication lands. So if your communication lands not the way you intended, then it makes sense to apologize and say, I'm sorry. I've clearly communicated with you in a way that has led you to understand me in ways that I did not intend. So let me go back and restate my intentions and try again. So choose to be responsible for how your communication lands. Responsibility is a cure for everything, because if I don't take responsibility, then I'm going to keep getting the poor results that I've been getting. When I do finally take responsibility for the results that I'm getting, to speak in leader terms, right? When I take responsibility, just like you want your team to take responsibility, when I take responsibility for the results that I'm getting, I can adapt and adjust in order to get different results. And so can you adapt and adjust if you want to get different results by taking responsibility for how your communication lands.
Such a good one. Such a good one. I just want everybody to be responsible leaders.
Yeah. Yay.
Responsible for everything I just said, everything Aaron just said. Just be responsible for being a leader, be accountable to yourself, hold this dear as a, something you've been granted as a privilege, not as a right. And that you need to earn this every day. And that includes having responsibility for all the things that you do with these diverse teams. And whether it's non-feedback, feedback, all the things, communication, non-communication, building a relationship, not being in a relationship, all those things you are responsible for. And your team is looking at you to lead them in a responsible way.
You're reminding me of something, Desiree, that Chris Voss says. Chris Voss, if you're not familiar with him, is the author of a book called Never Split the Difference, former FBI hostage negotiator. And he says something to the effect of, your communication is perfectly designed to give you the results that you're getting. And so if you want to get different results, you've got to change your communication, and taking responsibility for how your communication lands is prerequisite to that.
Absolutely. So good. Good one, Aaron.
All right.
I like that one.
Well, this has been an absolutely wonderful conversation. 8 ways to not walk on eggshells with your diverse teams. Leaders, I'm so glad that you have joined us. I hope that you've taken even just one thing forward that you can do that will lead you to be more confident and more effective as a leader of a diverse team. Any any final thoughts for the folks at home, Desiree?
No, I would just say lead with empathy, be the leader you know you can be. Take anything that you can. Just know that there are unique individuals on your teams that deserve all the caring and empathy
Mm,
that you can give them and true leadership. That would
right
be
on.
it.
All right. Well, I think those are words to live by. And so those are words that we can depart by. Thanks for joining us. See you next time.
Thank, thank you so much.